Well, we'd like to welcome everyone to our event that we have today, and we're very delighted and excited that we have an outstanding expert and master in group and team coaching. But before we get started, I wanted to share with everyone that we are recording the session. We have members that are not here today, so we will be sharing the recording with them afterwards. We do ask that you share as much information during this conversation. If you want us to stop the recording, we certainly can. Just send us a quick chat and we'll take care of that. Quick announcement, we do have peer coaching that is available with ICF San Antonio, so we encourage you to sign up. You can go to our website and find all the coaches that are currently available to peer coach. And basically under their bio, you will see their availability to peer coach. All you do is connect with them and set the agreements and start your peer coaching. Also, we have a member connect that happens every month, and we encourage you to come and meet other coaches that are part of the chapter. And we talk about some of the updates from global, but also challenges that we all face as coaches. And finally, for today's event, I would like us to turn our attention to Jennifer Brighton. And Jennifer has been an exciting partner with Global ICF as well, where she has been creating many standards, or at least informing some of the standards that ICF Global uses for team and group coaching. And before I turn it over to Jennifer, I at least wanted to share with you a little bit of what she has been able to accomplish. And Jennifer is not only an expert, but she has influenced a generation of coaches in group and team coaching. And she's an author of a book that was published on group coaching and effective group coaching back in 2009, but it was her research and writing in both group and team coaching that has been used in coach training globally for the last decade. And Jennifer's very passionate about supporting coaches to hone their skills in group and team coaching while creating sustainable coaching businesses. Jennifer's the founder and CEO of Potentials Realized, and she offers a suite of ICF CCE programs in the areas of group and team coaching. Virtual facilitation and support is certainly available. And today we're going to be hearing Jennifer talk to us about what is the new ACTC, or Advanced Certification in Team Coaching. She's also going to share with us what are the requirements for team coaching to complete their ACTC certification, and what type of training do coaches need to undertake, and who is the ideal coach candidate for ACTC. So welcome, coaches, and Jennifer, take it away.
Well, thank you so much. And it's great to be here, whether you're here live or I know in today's world, so many of you are joining us asynchronously. I'm going to share my screen because today is really a learning session and a sharing session, because for many of us, team coaching is something you've probably been hearing about. There's a lot of volume in the market space. ICF in the last year has now introduced their first of what I understand to be many specializations coming. And this is the ACTC, which is the Advanced Credential in Team Coaching. So it was really a pleasure to be asked by the chapter to come and talk a little bit about it. I've been involved with team coaching and team development now for more than 3 decades. And it's actually this is year 10, where we're celebrating my second book called From One to Many: Best Practices for Group and Team Coaching. Chances are you might have heard of the book, you might have heard of my name. I've had the privilege of working with so many coaches as well as coach training programs to help widen our skill set, our understanding of what it means to coach many. What happens when we scale the coaching conversation from one to many? And where that's brought us to, right? 2020, ICF embarked on a project to really identify and validate the team coaching competencies. So if you've not taken a moment, take some time after today's call or during the call to head on over to the ICF website and download those team coaching competencies. The great news is it's still our core coaching competencies. And in saying that, there is more complexity as we start to coach both groups and teams. So you might know me through Effective Group Coaching, my first book. And it was interesting. That book came out in 2009. It was the world's first book on group coaching, very well received. And my executive editor approached me like 2 years later and said, Jen, we really want to put out a next edition. And like, could you beef it up? I'm like, actually, I think we need to do a book on not only group coaching, but team coaching because they are different. And so today, I hope that you'll also start to think about, are you a team coach or a group coach? And I'm just going to really hold it very lightly in inviting you to think about, teams or coaching the entire entity of a team. Teams come together for a purpose, have intentional relationships to get things done. And look at that. Martha is holding up two of my books. So from one to many, that's the one I'm going to reference today, Martha, if you want to just hold it even further in front of your face. Also, there's reconnecting workspaces, but with from one to many, I really dive into what does it mean to be a group coach versus a team coach. I do want to specify that in today's conversation, we're really diving into what is team coaching. So we might be engaged to coach a project team. It might be an intact team, or likely we might be engaging with an entity that is ever changing. And some of you might be familiar with the work of Amy Edmonston, who coined the term teaming back in the late sort of 2008, 2009. I would really recommend Amy's book on teaming, and she has another one called Extreme Teaming, which really is valuable, especially in today's world of ongoing change around teams. So just to level set today, we're really talking team coaching. I'd like you, as we get started, to really think about what's important for you in advancing your skills, knowledge, and practice as a team coach. Okay, because part of this session is to really talk about ICF's first specialization. And, it's not something that you just do, like as many of us who are probably credentialed recognize that getting to your ACC or your PCC or your MCC isn't something you sit down and put the paperwork in for tomorrow. It's something that we aspire to and we work to. And this is why this is called an advanced credential in team coaching. So you might notice for any of us that hold it, it actually sits on top of our current level of ICF credentialing, ACC, MCC, PCC. And so for you, I'd love to just engage you right now. We've got a small group here live on the line, but what's important for you in advancing your skills, knowledge, and practice as a team coach? And I'd love to hear, like, maybe you're getting a lot of requests, or perhaps you're just curious about this. Share with us in chat what's important in advancing your skills. And I'm going to be doing a lot of the talking. So might you take a look at chat for me there and be my voice? Yeah, perfect. So let's see what you're saying, because we're hearing a lot of drivers, right? We have the context in which we coach. And I think organizations right now are very intrigued about team coaching. I've said this now for more than a decade, that team coaching really can be a preferred vehicle for organizations that really want to focus on capacity development, on really affecting change at a much larger level. And that's how I came into coaching more than 2 decades ago. I actually started my coach training. I was trained originally through CTI, through Coaches Training Institute, like so many of us at that time. And I was still a leader within the United Nations system. So I had a team. I had a team of 30 professionals from 26 different nationalities, and they were in 10 countries. And on a Monday morning, once a month, pretty much, I would leave home 4 a.m. to catch the first flight out of where I was based. I had 2 briefcases in my hand, and my goal that week was to touch base with almost everyone on the team. Sure, we had internet, but internet could only do so much. And these were days where we were still using Yahoo groups, not even what we have today. And so as I really was deeply involved in this world, when I found coaching, my first question was, this is great, but I don't see myself sitting down with one person at a time. I work with teams, I work with governments. My conversations are with many people at one time. And initially I would get responses like, but Jen, that's facilitation and training. Like we're training you to be a coach. And I'm like, yes, and I'm a professional facilitator. Like I'd been a professional facilitator since 1993. And I was like, this is different. This is not facilitation. I see something is really different. So as we flash forward now to 2023, there is so much opportunity. So I'm going to go to chat. Let's see what people on the line are saying in terms of what's important about this topic for you today in this moment.
Yeah, Jennifer, we've got a couple of comments here. We have that Dan, he currently coaches teams and he just wants to improve. So better understanding the difference between team coaching and facilitation. That's interesting because there's coaching group coaching, and then there's that wonderful world of facilitation, right? That crosses between those two. So the distinction is really key. And then also understanding and accelerating the coaching requirements and use in team coaching and team and group coaching, so that what we're doing with clients can have an impact. And then Martha mentioned that she already has her certification in team coaching. So maybe Martha, a takeaway you would want, an important skill that you want to take away to advance your skill. And Carissa, there's great demand for team coaching for cohesion and capacity building.
So much. So I'm going to invite you, let's keep the chat open as we go, because this really is an evolutionary part of our field, and we learn and we bring our experience from clients, right? That is, we're really on the edge of informing practice and theory by the work that is done with teams. And so very much I come from that lens, right? I'm not an academic. I've always been a practitioner. I really embrace praxis, which is both practice and theory. And as a writer, I'm always scanning the horizon, like what is happening right now. So I just wanted to sort of level set this whole conversation with an article that came out earlier this year, where Choice Magazine had asked me to do a third article in the last decade on what's happening in the team coaching realm. And so as I wrote this, late last year, I was thinking, what are the things that are really happening and influencing team coaching right now? And I'd love for you also, again, to put into chat, what are you seeing? Because I wrote this in December, or it was published in December, so it was written a little bit earlier last fall, but already we're seeing continued change in what teams are facing. So then I said, it's about paradigm shifts. And if we look to the landscape of what's still happening in the workspace, the tussle of war, is there enough trust for you to work from home, or do you have to be in the office? Can collaboration really happen in a virtual space? That is still an ongoing discussion. Systems approaches, huge for so many of us. I was trained originally in the days of Peter Senge. And in my work as a grad student in the early 1990s, I learned very quickly as a practitioner that we really can't take any conversation outside, like in a vacuum. We need to really be looking at context and system. And as we think about what has happened in the team coaching realm, certainly many of the models that we look at now are systems influenced and systems grounded. So what are you individually and collectively doing to really look at the systems component of this work? For those of us that are working with groups, and we hear this in teams, it's that yearning and that real strong need for belonging. How do I connect? How am I different? How am I making a contribution? And in this moment, wherever we are in a pandemic or post-pandemic, very much it's about, how do I take charge of my career? Quiet quitting and all of these things. And as teams change, how are we helping teams continue to build relationships in a context of hyper results? And I think it's, in my writing, especially in Reconnecting Workspaces, which you saw Martha put up, that was my 2021 book. That book is all about exploring this sort of continuum of results and relationships. And what do we really need in an evolving workspace, especially a hybrid space, right? We can try to push people for results, but we're just going to wind up with burnout. So how do we really create that rich web of relationships? And if you've seen my first TED Talk, which came out in summer of 2021, that was called the Virtual Remote Hybrid Checklist. And at its core was this notion that I wrote about in Effective Virtual Conversations in 2017 around the triad of trust, safety, and connection, right? Part of our competency-based is, we used to call it building trust and rapport. Now it's, really trust and safety. As a group and team coach, I add that connection layer on. And so what are we doing to boost connectivity within the people, the realm of the people that we're working with. It's essential for building that trust and safety. I've already mentioned teaming and the importance of that right now. I don't think that's going to come off the radar screen for 2023. And then we're also seeing a lot around adaptive and emerging models. So some of the work of like David Clutterbuck, working around complexity and things like that. I think these are really important influences to start educating ourselves around, or even just putting our antenna up. So, today's call really is going to be quite broad. I do want to spend a lot of time with the asterisks of I am not representing ICF here, right? I'm really here as an independent coach and wanting to say, as we get started, I'm just bringing to you what ICF has set as the ACTC requirements. So just to really spark some dialogue, spark some conversation, spark some thinking so that you can also position yourself. What do you want to be doing now? What can you be structuring right now with your client base so that you are getting the requisite experience, skills, and practice to really apply for the ACTC, whether that's now or that's at a different time. So before I dive into that, let's just see, is there anything new in chat that I haven't seen yet?
Jennifer, there's a couple of comments as you were talking about what we're seeing. And Carissa mentioned teams are really experiencing a lot of disruption that you mentioned and how to navigate that disruption, that whole VUCA. And Martha chimed in, also said that teams are really struggling to going back from the virtual space to hybrid work environments, which you touched on as well.
Yeah. My second TED Talk, which I did here in Toronto, December 1st, 2022, this winter, and it was released only about a month ago. I'll invite you to watch it. It's called Coaching Teams Through Chaos. And it's really grounded in the disruption factor of how do we meet teams, what is needed by teams. So a little bit around this results and relationships piece, but also the tremendous diversity of the teams that exist in the landscape that we work within. How do we really support people with varying needs? Those team members who are more builders and want to get things done versus the person who is the connector on the team and wants to make sure that everyone is on the same page. I'm in Toronto, Canada, and we have a really fascinating moment in time. All of this is made more complex by hybrid work. And in fact, the public sector here in this country went on strike last week. One of the biggest demands was retaining the ability to work flexibly. They are now past the 1 week mark, and what they're hammering out, and this is impacting everything from taxation to getting your taxes in to passport issues, etc. So it's a really big strike, and a lot of it is around this flexible work. And so how are people coming to work? And they are part of teams. So let's segue in. Disruption is part of this, and so how do we support? And this is where I want to drop in to really the ICF landscape. What is required and why is there even this new specialization or the advanced certification? So I'm pulling this exactly from ICF's website. I'm not going to read through it. I don't expect you to read through it. But just as we said, it's about the complexity. The workspace is complex. Teams are needed to affect change at a global level, at a macro level. We need to harness the capabilities of many. This was how I came into coaching as that team leader a long time ago. I used to work in post-disaster management, and I knew that my work as a leader was just one little piece of this much bigger mechanism that could help countries literally get back on their feet after they had a hurricane, after a volcano wiped out their capital city. We're talking change in terms of long-term and micro-term, short-term. The notion with team coaching is we're working consistently across disruption and complexity. Sometimes in one moment, we might be working with team on a very immediate, forest fire issue, versus sometimes it's helping them look to the horizon and what might be coming down the road, whether that coming down the road is like next week or even 5 weeks from now. With everything from the impact of, say, AI and ChatGPT and how that is really transforming organizations like this, we also need to, I think, also educate ourselves. And this is where the new advanced certification is just not, as I've said, it's not just about learning, it's about getting out there and practicing, being in dialogue with everyone else. So a lot of reasons, we've touched on some of that. What is unique is that they're really helping us articulate what is the difference. So we won't dive into this today to much great depth, but what is the difference between team coaching and other team development modalities? Martha put up a copy of From One to Many, 10 years ago. Really, the first few chapters of that book really look at what are these distinctions. And, as someone who came into coaching as a professional facilitator, my work as a facilitator has always been, how do we make things easy, right? Facilitation comes from the Latin root of facilis, to make it easy. And so as teams, as a facilitator, I'm there to support them in really gaining a little bit of clarity. But at the end of the day, I can walk away. When I show up as a team coach, it's a long-term relationship or a deeply intensive relationship where we're working with that team to gain clarity. I would frame it as around results and relationships, right? That is my framing. And other leaders in this field have different frames, but for me, it's truly about results and relationships. So it is a partnership, right? Which is what coaching is grounded in. It's also about helping the team identify and manage their own complex dynamics and patterns. Coach, we want to be working ourselves out of a job, right? And teams are together sometimes 24/7, and we might only be coming in once every few weeks. So what are we doing to harness that skill and capability around capacity development? I know that was earlier in the chat, but I think that's a really big piece. Along with this notion that teams don't operate in a vacuum, right? Who are the stakeholders? Different coaching models work with stakeholders in different ways. And this is where I'm relatively model agnostic as a practitioner, right? I think the strength of team coaches really is in exploring the variety of models that are out there. And there's quite a few stakeholder models, really systems models. Certainly some of the early training I did years ago, 20 years ago, was with ORSC, Organization Relationship Systems, as they were just coming online. And that whole toolkit of ORSC skills really helps us with stakeholders and really looking at how does a team interrelate with stakeholders. These are some of the other areas, but what I'd like to get you to do, and I'm not sure if we can annotate right now, I'm going to just see if you can annotate, which is always found at the top of your screen. You may see you're viewing Jennifer Britton's screen. And as you click on that, hover to the right, just see if you can find a view options. As you click on view options, and you can click on annotate. And as you click on annotate, then you're hopefully going to see a new toolbar pop up. And as you see the new toolbar, you're going to notice about 5 in from the left, one that says stamp, or you'll see like a little star. What I'd like you to do, this time we're not going to go to chat, but we're going to use this annotate function to have you highlight the one area where you would see yourself most likely supporting a team. Is it around, I mentioned some of the dynamics. Is it about stakeholders? Is it about conflict? Is it about sustainability, right? There's a lot of different layers. And notice, even as we start to stamp, we're getting pretty good coverage across a number of different areas. So some of you are using the stamp function. Some of you are using the text, which is fine. The beauty of this work is our teams need everything, right? Like very much. Every engagement can be a little bit different. So we've pretty much got everything covered. No surprise to me as a team coach trainer for many, many years. What is interesting, and this is why I'm really a proponent of developing a wide variety of tools and having many models to pull from. In one conversation, you may be working around conflict. In another conversation, it might be around dynamics. And then we need to look at, well, what about, sustainability? And as someone who worked for the UN before the SDGs came on the scene, I was with the UN in 2000 when we were starting to bring in the Millennial Development Goals, which were not successful, which is why we moved from MDGs to SDGs. And in my work over the last 2 decades, right, like very much it changes a long-term process, especially on a team level. So thank you for sharing that. If you're not using annotation, there's a dual layer of learning here, right? How might you be bringing people's voices in through developing that collective annotation piece? So I will clear this. And again, one little note I always like to say with annotation, and you can take a screenshot if you like. Again, I'll save one. But I think if we had a larger group as well, we'd also have that same representation. So I'm going to clear that because we're still at the beginning of this, which is really why are we doing this and what's important about getting this credential. I think many of you might be listening to like, what's required? What do I need to do? So notice that these are changing. The applications are now in. There's actually two pathways. One, you need to have an ICF credential, right? So you can't directly go to the ACTC. You need to have at least an ACC, PCC, or MCC. There are two pathways now. You can either do 60 hours of team coach education, and that can be a combination of CCEs, or in the last few weeks, ICF is now starting to stamp programs as an AATC, an approved accredited training program for team coaching. And that is going to help you really say, you know what, I either bring 60 new hours of team coach education, or you can also have a second pathway. I don't like to make things complex, but you could also do things with prior learning. So 30 hours of training with a lot of prior learning done, but that needs to be team coaching. They have not specified that that includes group coaching. Also, there needs to be completion of at least 5 team coaching engagements if you go the 60-hour route within the last 5 years. And unlike what we would do with the ACC, PCC, MCC, we're not submitting team coaching assignments. We're not actually submitting a tape or submitting a recording. This is, I would say, a little bit different and more like it's rigorous in its own way, in that there needs to be documentation from the sponsor or one of the members. It could be a team leader or someone else, and then reflections from the coach on what those engagements were like. So I know Martha had said she has her ACTC. I know when I went through the pilot myself, I found this to be like one of those moments where it was like, wow, that seems to be a lot of work. Like, how will these teams react? Because I was reaching back to teams like from 2017, 2018, in that 5-year window. And what I found with the teams that I had reached back to was like, wow, we never really understand. And I've written about this for a long time, but we don't often understand the impact that we've had in helping these teams pivot, but then they take that pivot even further, right? I like to say teams are like elephants, right? They have these small shifts. And if you sail, as my sister does, those small rudder shifts, 1 degree, can like move you from going from, say, New York up to Atlantic Canada. Instead of going there, you might wind up in Iceland, or you could wind up in Senegal in West Africa. So, it's the small changes that teams make. So think about the team coaching engagements. And I think this was related to one of the questions we had. How, what do I need to do? Well, how are you documenting this? How are you establishing agreements as you go to say, you know what, I want to be working towards this new credential. I would like to have permission to reach back to you, maybe be able to use it as a case study, et cetera, et cetera. So there's going to be some need, as per our designing or co-designing agreements, to really think about how you will be able to say, yes, I've done 5 or 10 of these engagements in the last 5 years. There's also a requirement around supervision. I'll get into this, but it's really, I think the big change we're going to be seeing is in the realm of supervision. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because we can coach and we can supervise one-on-one, but there are evolving best practices and skills and training around supervising in a team coaching landscape as well. So I want to just pause because I've been talking again for a little bit. Anything new that's popping up in the chat that we should mention or look at?
Nothing in the chat, Jennifer, other than Martha making a comment that when teams are global, going back to the office doesn't make much sense anymore to a lot of clients, when we were talking about some of the challenges that we're definitely seeing.
Yes.
But also maybe if you could talk a little bit about the coaching engagements and what that looks like for coaches that have had those in the past 5 years.
Yes.
Yeah, in the last 5 years. Mm-hmm.
Last 5 years. So again, coaching engagements, right? We really want to specify here that it's a coaching engagement. So what is at the core of that? Are there agreements that this was coaching and not facilitation and not training? Is it not just a one-off, right? Coaching is not just the one-off, showing up for a half-day retreat. we really need to demonstrate that it is an ongoing engagement with a co-designed agreement. And so looking at that, you'll want to think about who do you work with and what do you have on the horizon? How do you ensure that you're really working within the team coaching construct? Now, one document I didn't do a snap on or a snag on today, which would have maybe been useful. There's a document under the ICF website which lays out the team coaching competencies. If you have not downloaded the ICF document on team coaching competencies, please do so right now. Like, take a moment and go grab it, because as you download that document, you'll not only see the ICF competencies, but you'll also see this fantastic continuum, right, of team coaching versus team facilitation, team consulting, team training. And it really spells out some of those distinctions. And so as coaches, are we really coaching? Are we somewhere in that gradient? And when you're going to put in for the eligibility, it's really essential that we're coaching. We're not just, oh yeah, I worked with this team on a retreat. Okay, but where's the coaching component? How are you working with action and awareness, goals and insights? What are you doing to evoke awareness on a collective level? So I think, we could be having this conversation even 6 months from now. This is going to be getting a lot clearer as more people go through the process. And one part of the process, which I haven't even touched on yet, which is why I think it's really important to be thinking about it, is there is a new ICF team coaching certification exam. So different than the CKE or CKA, the coach knowledge assessment that most of us are familiar with as credentialed coaches, there is now a new team coaching certification exam. Similarly, I would call it scenario based, although that's not quite the term they use, but it's very much looking at, here's a situation. How would you react? What's your best and what's your worst options in terms of the reaction? So as a coach training institute ourselves, this is an area that in our sort of sequencing of courses, we have a 60-hour pathway and also a 125-hour pathway, because the recognition is that even after 60 hours of training, we are still learning and evolving. I would say for myself as a practitioner, the day that I stop learning is the day that I should stop team coaching, because the work is always going to take us into something new, whether it's coaching related, team related, workspace related. We really want to keep learning. So the ICF team coaching certification exam, like the CKA in one-on-one coaching, focuses on the competencies. And this is where you'll really want to have that deep appreciation of it. I talked a little bit earlier about the different pathways. And again, so you will see at the ICF website, you can create an application. You can use your 60 hours of team coaching education, check that it is CCE approved. And as I would say, within the next 6 months, there'll be more of us that actually have gotten the stamp of being an advanced accredited team coaching training. It just started that process. So give it a few months to really have that. If you don't want to do the 60 hours and you want to do sort of a hybrid of 30 hours of team coaching education plus prior team coaching experience, and that needs to be pretty significant, 10 engagements. 10 engagements. That's not like a 1 day. This could be a 6-month, 1 year engagement. So if that fits you, that might be the option that you want to follow through. And I'd invite you again, take a look at the ICF website to do that. Prior learning, I think for many of us is really, a reality. Just note that though it needs to be team coaching, and looking at the prior learning, we may only just do 30 hours of team coaching education. That might be new. There might be older team coaching education that you can count in the process. Supervision is a big piece. So I've talked a little bit about the demonstration of past work, right? Whether you're going 60 hours or 30 hours, prior learning, it really is about demonstrating what you have done. Note that team coaching delivered with teams of more than 15 members must include a co-coach, right? One of the biggest questions we get is, well, hey, I was working actually with a department. Would I consider that to be team coaching? If the department's 30 people and there's 2 of you co-coaching, yes, it would be okay. It would fall within that umbrella. We, I think as a profession, want to also be really clear on when are we moving beyond the team level to the quote unquote, as many writers call it, the team of teams, and into that whole systems perspective of like, oh, I'm working with an entire system here of 100 people. So you might have multiple coaches working in multiple ways. Your choice, right? But really key to this is we need to verify our work. So as you're going, as you're designing, I said this earlier, really talk to your clients about how you can um, reach back to them to have that letter of support from them about the work that you've done. And as I think I said, but I'll say it again, like it really is interesting to see what impact your work has had. 6 months down the road, 3 years down the road. I think this is a motivator for many of us. Like anything, there's going to be an ACTC renewal. So I do like to surface this because I think a lot of people, I've seen this for years as a mentor coach, they leave it to the last minute. Once we get our ACTC, we also need to continue with continuing education around team coaching. Not just anything, it has to be team coaching. A minimum of 16 CCEs must be directly applicable to the ICF team coaching competencies. So just note that it's not 40 hours, it's 20 hours every 3 years specific to team coaching for this. Minimum of 16 CCEs, and then total required 20 may be submitted. Now, of that, up to 10 hours could be coaching supervision. So let's talk a little bit about coaching supervision. You know, as someone who is I've just been doing a year-long coaching supervision diploma with CSA, Coaching Supervision Academy. As I entered this last year, I'd already done advanced training as a supervisor with Peter Hawkins, actually, in team coaching, and recognized in my days with Peter that I was like, there's still a lot to learn. Like, I've been a mentor coach for 15 years, but mentor coaching is not supervision. And as I've really gone through this last year of learning myself, like, this is a whole new field for us, especially those of us in North America. So I'm not going to do a whole spiel on coaching supervision other than to say, really, to be in integrity with the whole evolution of the team coaching space, you want to make sure that you are working with a supervisor who is really, I don't think they have to be specialized per se in team coaching, but there are different models that we use, right? We're not just using the 7-eyed model to supervision, we're using the 10-eyed model. Supervision at its core is a reflective space to sit back and look at what we're doing as team coaches. And the complexity of the work can be huge. So I do find with a lot of the people that I supervise, a lot of the team and group coaches that I supervise, some of it is one-on-one. So we might sit down every month and we work together. Could start out at 6 months. I have clients or supervisees that have been with me for the last year. But also I do 2 different coaching supervision groups. And like this work, that's that collaborative space where you can really start looking at these 3 areas of supervision. So to me, what does it mean to develop, right? This is where we can hone our skills. What are the skills required as a great team coach? Also, how do we restore ourselves? What do we do to renew ourselves? Team coaching is a different energy, right? Like I think even if we have a great team, like stepping away from that conversation to feel like, whoa, I've really done some great work today. I really had some good conversations, but there's an energy and a need for restoration and replenishing, we might call it. Likewise, normative. What can we do? What are we looking at to be our best, boldest, most ethical coach as well, especially in the team coaching space? And given the complexity, we can have issues coming at us, everything from, organizational political issues where all of a sudden the coach becomes like a pawn in a political game. We might also face issues around conflict and, really looking at that. We may have some team members totally engaged in an issue and others resistant. So how do we address these topics? These are things that we really invite team coaches to bring to supervision. And there's no right answer, which is why I think coming as in a collaborative space. So you do want to make sure that you have a coaching supervisor that brings the criteria required. And I sort of say this because I think just like in the early days of mentor coaching, 15 years ago, people would get to the stage of submitting their ACC, PCC and be told, oh, your mentor coach doesn't meet the requirements. What? And we don't want people to go through supervision and have that supervisor not meet requirements. So one, that team coaching supervisor needs to hold an active coaching supervision credential or accreditation by a coaching or coaching supervision professional body. That could be a short program or a long program, but note that it needs to be at least 60 hours long with at least 120 hours of coaching supervision experience. That can take a year or two to get. Or they might be an ICF mentor coach, hopefully in the registry, with 60 hours of coaching supervision education and at least 120 hours of experience. I would say, again, as this evolves, one of your questions in selecting a supervisor may be, what's been your experience with team coaching? Or because a supervisor may bring some of that subject matter expertise, what supervision models are they using? Are they using a team coaching supervision model, which is different than a one-on-one, to recognize the complexity of this work? So I think this may be an interesting area. I say that as a supervisor, I say that as a mentor coach. I say that as an expert in team coaching. One-on-one and team coaching is not the same. And so how do we ensure that we're resourcing ourselves really well in being selective in the supervision component as well? So notice anywhere from 5 to 10 hours of coaching supervision is required for the credential. Current best practice is that you're going to work with a team coaching supervisor on a regular basis if you are doing work, right? It is that complex. I, even in this last year and a half, have had 2 different supervisors. I work with one specifically around team coaching engagements, my own team coaching engagements, because they can get very complicated, whether it's ethical issues or co-coaching issues or stakeholder issues. It can be valuable to have someone who is specialized in that. And as well as I work with a second supervisor around more general practice issues. So let me pause here. I've given a lot of information. We've got maybe 15 minutes left of our call. What questions, comments do you have? Has there been anything else that's shown up in chat? Let's go to chat again. And I'm not tempting fate to open my chat because sometimes that crashes.
No messages in chat. It is a tremendous amount of information, and there's so many different pathways that lead to the team or the group coaching. But I'll open it up to the folks that are here online if they have any questions. Just open it up.
I know we've got Martha here as well. I don't know if Martha would want to, she's available to sort of talk about her experience as well, what she might have found, on reflection, something that was wish she had done. I know for me that really the most challenging piece was, what are the teams I want to select? And did I really have an agreement with them that I could reach back to them? Right? Like this was not anything even on the horizon 5 years ago. But now going forward, it's like, hey, I hold this credential. I may need to validate that we've done work. Who would be appropriate to talk about that? Or what would you want to share? So that was for me one piece. But yeah, what questions are coming in there? Anything at all?
No questions. But the coaching supervision, Jennifer, it would probably be good to touch on just all this great information. But how are coaches going to be able to, and where can they start this journey? So maybe before we answer that question, I want to open it up again, just to see if anyone is thinking about a question.
And while you're thinking, yeah, anything coming up there?
I'll pop in here with a question. I'm Carissa Gay. I'm an MCC coach, and my focus primarily has been on the one-on-one for most of my business, but certainly the demand is great in the team area. And you mentioned that there's starting to be more trainings offered specifically in building the team coaching skills. Are there certain standout ones that you would recommend in that? I mean, I've seen a few popping up online, but how do you even go about researching, I guess, a good team coaching training?
Well, yeah, and that is a piece, right? Like I think many of us have been in early days of industries where all of a sudden everyone is an expert in team coaching. And so you do, like there are many of us who, and we're a very collaborative space of thought leaders. I've been part of a global thought leader network. You know, there's 20 of us on the network, and we've been meeting regularly every quarter for about 3 to 4 years now. And so you have UK authors. I don't want to like point out like any, but there's a really big hub of people who write out of the UK. And maybe that's like, to me, what I love about this space is we can really start getting exposed to things that might be outside of our rut, right? Like I think the mastery of a coach is when we can actually continue growing, because we can become very comfortable in the toolkit and the approaches that we bring. And the challenge for teams is like, am I bringing the variety that's needed? Now, whether it's us or the co-coaches we work with, this is where it can be valuable. So I think to keep it really simple, which is like, you can see the complexity of this whole new credential. There's a lot of complexity. So like, where do we go? First of all, you can go to the education, I think it's called the ESS now at ICF, Education Search Service. Enter terms like team coaching. And that way you're going to, one, ensure that either you get a, right now it's probably a CCE program like what we offer. Increasingly in the next 6 months, you'll start seeing many of us becoming an AATC, which is an approved and accredited team coaching training institution. So that's a whole new designation, right? It's not an ACTP, it's not an ACSTH, it's not a level 1, 2, or 3. It is really just a designation saying this organization offers team coaching specialization. So I think do your due diligence. You know, many of us write, speak, and so you can also find out from that if it is appropriate. You know, we have developed, and maybe I'll flash forward in a little bit to talk about our training at Potentials Realized. You know, you'll find us under Potentials Realized or Group Coaching Essentials. And very much we've expanded from what we used to call the trifecta, Group Coaching Essentials, Team Coaching Essentials, and a practicum, to now offer 10 courses. And some coaches go, whoa, that's a lot. But it reflects the need for a minimum of 60 hours. Like everything from group dynamics to managing conflict, to understanding our presence as a team coach, which can be different than when we sit one-on-one with an individual client. So I would suggest, you know, if anyone has questions, happy to talk further on this. I've got my contact details, but very quickly, it's just calendly.com/Jen Britton, JENNBRITTON. But to keep it simple, I think this is a great question, Carissa. Like, go to the ESS, right? Like, I think you want to do this with recognition that, you know, you are working with an organization that is aligned with the ICF, that understands what the core coaching competencies are from an individual and a team coaching layer, because it is the same body, but we still have a lot of training organizations that are not even aligned with ICF. There is other organizations. So I do want to acknowledge, you know, for many coaches coming in through the UK and Europe, we also have the EMCC designation. And ICF has really sort of looked to the EMCC because they're a couple of years ahead of us in terms of credentialing and assessing team coaches. So there's a lot of learning I think that's going to happen, and it would be interesting to sort of catch up around this a few months from now to see also, might be something you as a chapter talk about. What do you recommend? Who have you gone to? Yeah. Is that useful, Carissa? Do you have any insights that you'd like to share from your perspective?
That is really useful. I mean, it's something I've kept my pulse on for a number of years, that in some ways it's an aspect of the industry that's being shaped as it's going forward, with even now this emphasis on supervision, because that's another area where Europe is way ahead. But yes, now there's more and more discussion about, is supervision a built-in part of the coach's development, and what does that look like? So I'm glad you brought that component into the conversation. And it's fascinating to me that it's being built in as a requirement for team coaching from the get-go as a part of the certification.
Absolutely. And you might, you know, very to your point of like, this is evolving like in the moment. I think it was just last week when I got a survey link, because I am a coaching supervisor from ICF asking for input, right? They are starting the process we went through 3 years ago with team coaching, which took about a year and a half of really looking at like, what are the competencies required for team coaches? There was a year plus of like research focus meetings that they facilitated, very in depth. And I think my understanding is that like the next wave, or that one of the next focus areas, is now going to be supervision. What are the requirements for supervision? What does a supervisor do in the world of the ICF? It's clear from an EMCC standpoint, but what does that mean for us in the world of the ICF as well? So it's exciting times, right? If you want to keep developing as a coach, these are areas that are going to challenge you, help you continue to grow as a coach as well. So any other questions? Here's a link if you're interested in our coaching supervision group. We have 2 groups that meet. I meet monthly on a Monday, not always the same Monday of the week or the month. And that is a 9 to 10:30 a.m. We really invite people to bring their cases, their examples of what's happening. And we've had another group that's been meeting since September. I want to say September. Since September. On Thursdays. We meet the first Thursday of every month, 12 to 1:30. Both of these groups are sort of open enrollment. So you can start supervision at any time, right? It's not as structured as you have to start like when a new group starts. Our Thursday group has been an open enrollment. I think our Monday group will also wind up to be pretty much open enrollment as well. So feel free to scan that, call me, I think it's valuable at this moment in time to get multiple perspectives around this as well. You're hearing my personal perspective, but having been very much embedded in this, right? Just before the pandemic started, a handful of us were supposed to be in Miami the week of March 6, 2020, to start looking at the team coaching competencies. Obviously, that went virtual very quickly. And most of 2020 was in conversations with colleagues around the world, like, what are the skills required for team coaching? So we've had that now for 2 years in the ecosystem. And now we're really looking at, well, what does it mean from an educational standpoint to make sure that we're training people. And this is our pathway, right? It's either the 60 hours, which is the dark blue. So from an author perspective, from a practitioner perspective, I'm very a strong advocate, I think, is a term. Like, I think group and team coaching usually go hand in hand. We've taken our group coaching essentials program, which has been our flagship for 19 years now, sort of as a precursor, because to coach groups is complex, but to coach teams is even more complex. And so we do invite coaches to think about, where do you want to start? Is it easier to start with a group, or do you want to jump right in with a team? And a big part of the training is also not just thinking about this and taking a class, but let's put it into practice. So in 2010, actually, I introduced the advanced, used to be called the Advanced Group and Team Coaching Practicum, where coaches in that 6 weeks program, they're just practicing and getting feedback on their skills. And this is an inherent part of our work. Last summer, I launched a new program called Activating Your Team and Group Coaching Superpowers, because really we do bring different presence. So how do we also round out that presence as we show up? And because we're working with diverse teams and groups, what are the different styles we want to be looking for? How do we ask questions differently? How do we make sure we're bringing in approaches to meet the different needs in a room, physically or virtually? Because there's a lot that's happening in a group of people. And because finally we look at usually co-coaching, we also have a co-coaching essentials program. So that's our 60-hour pathway. You'll be hearing more because we are looking to partner with your chapter on offering this at a discounted rate for those that are interested. So scan away, you can find, our upcoming programs. We have groups starting pretty much every month. And it's sort of it's a fun area to learn. So we've got groups starting May 1st, June 1st. This is really the simpler version, right, of starting with essentials and moving on, and very much invite you to have a conversation around it. So we're almost at the end of our call. I've done a few calls on this. You can find me on YouTube as Effective Group Coach. And one of the calls really addressed some of these frequently asked questions, like, what if I've already taken some of your courses, or I want more practice, or how do I learn? What models do you use? What can I learn in the process? So definitely check out YouTube as you go. And we do regular community calls. So our next community call, these typically happen on a Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern. They're half an hour, but you can go into the YouTube channel to see demos around coaching supervision. We've touched on that today. We also do demos on group coaching. We talk about team coaching. So there's well over 150 videos there now that you can go and consume if something from today's conversation piques your interest. So I think that's really what I wanted to share today. We have 5 minutes left. What other questions? I think I'll just stop my share. What other questions do you have?
Jennifer, it's really important to share that we have another opportunity for coaches to experience the group versus the team coaching. And we'll be doing some live demonstrations during International Coaching Week. And so if you go to our website, you'll see an event that we have planned with Jennifer coming up in May during International Coaching Week. And we invite leaders, maybe people that you're talking to about what group and team coaching is, so that they have a taste of what this looks like. And that date that we have Jennifer coming back is on, I believe, Wednesday, this May 17th. And we don't have it on our website just quite yet, but it is coming.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the 10th. Yeah, the week before. May the 10th. Yes.
And
I think it's the 10th.
yes, thank you. Yes, there it is. I couldn't find it. That's why. Yes.
I think that'll be
May 10th from 11:30 a.m. to.
Yeah. And just to build, like, I think, Dan, you had the question of like team versus group. We're really going to get into some of that nuance. Today's call was much more about how do you prepare and how do you really position yourself, position your work so that it is applicable. So Dan, did you have a question? Did you want to ask anything?
So I think my question is centered around, people that would ask, what's the value added if I have my ACC, PCC, MCC, I can still team coach.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So what's the added value of the ACTC?
So I think we aren't seeing it yet, but I think the market will, like credentialing was 15 years ago. It just helps to say I've met a certain level of standard. And I think as practitioners, it's important that we say, you know what, I have specialized skills in this area. So when I got my PCC back in 2007, there was something like 300 people who had a credential. Right now we're past 52,000. So, ACTC, first pilot group, there were 120 of us. Someday there will probably be, 25,000 team coaches. So I think early days, it's more of a, how do I keep learning and how do I demonstrate? I think the conversation that you're sparking now behind what is team coaching and what's the benefit of team coaching? Why would we even consider this? So think about the first few minutes of our call today. And I think that will be sort of a through line to the May 10th conversation. Why would we want to think about group coaching or team coaching? And in what instances is it appropriate? Or maybe where is it more appropriate to also continue with one-on-one coaching, right? We need to discern what's the best modality in any engagement, not just say, oh, everyone's doing team coaching. There's a readiness factor, right? If we think about where the industry, what we talked about coaching readiness maybe 12 years ago, one-on-one, like we've got to talk about coaching readiness for teams, for groups. That's a really critical part. So I think we can learn from our evolution on a professional basis. If we look back 10, 15 years with one-on-one discussions, how are we expediting those same conversations in the team coaching realm, which is why things I think are moving so quickly right now. So thank you very much for being here. I hope this has sparked some interest on your behalf. It was really a pleasure to spend some time with you, maybe over your lunch hour, and I'll hand it back to you.
All right, Jennifer, thank you again for a great presentation for coaches to go deeper in understanding what is the difference between team and group coaching and what does this certification look like? And are there considerations that we as coaches need to make, whether it's our cost, our time, or differentiating the value that we're bringing as a coach? I know for me personally, this is an area I've always been in group and team coaching and out in the community, similar to you, Jennifer. It's bringing all those stakeholders in to, cast that vision and how we all work together. And it is related to that facilitation skill of results and relationship. There's process in between. But it's great for you to leave us with this content. And by the way, I'm glad to hear that Peter Senge, fifth discipline.
Yes.
Excellent book on systems thinking, because that's where the group dynamic is certainly looking at those different impacts that we look at, not just, the results of the team, but it's the individual, where their mindsets are, and how they can contribute to the greater good of the group or the team. All right. Well, thank you all so much. And we look forward to seeing you back in May during International Coaching Week. Look for this recording on YouTube, and Jennifer, we'll see you soon.
See you soon, everyone. Take care.